My name is Clara Vance, and for 32 years of my life, I lived in the suffocating shadow of an unspoken force. It wasn't a loud, tyrannical presence, but something far more insidious. The quiet, pervasive power of my grandmother, Eleanor. She never raised her voice, never gave a direct order, yet her every sigh, every subtle glance, every carefully chosen word of disappointment held an iron grip over our family. I always felt it, a cold, invisible hand guiding every decision, shaping every opinion, especially when it came to me. I was the artist, the dreamer, the one who dared to live outside her meticulously crafted expectations, and for that I was constantly a target. I knew deep down that her unspoken power had poisoned our family for decades, but I couldn't grasp it, couldn't articulate it, until she reached for my art, for my dream, and tried to burn it to the ground. That's when I realized the unspoken had to be spoken, no matter the cost. If you've ever felt controlled by someone who never had to say a word, if you've been subtly manipulated, undermined, or made to feel like you're crazy for seeing what's truly there, then you know the unique pain of living under the thumb of unspoken power. It's a violation that leaves no physical marks but scars your soul. It makes you question your reality, your worth, and your very sanity. But sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most profound acts of self-liberation. So if this story resonates with you, if you've fought to reclaim your voice in a family that tried to silence you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming impossible family challenges. And tell me where you're watching or listening from in the comments below. Your stories empower us all to find our truth. My life before that pivotal moment was a carefully constructed haven of quiet independence, far removed from the emotional complexities of my family. I was 32 years old, and my world revolved around my art. I lived in a bright, sun-drenched one-bedroom apartment in the city's historic arts district, a vibrant neighborhood bustling with galleries, cafes, and studios. My apartment, nestled in a charming brick building, was a reflection of my soul. Walls adorned with my own abstract paintings, shelves overflowing with art books and ceramic pieces, and a large, worn armchair by the window that served as my reading nook, bathed in the soft glow of morning light. It was a space I had meticulously crafted, filled with the warmth of creativity and the comforting scent of turpentine and freshly brewed coffee. This apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was a testament to the life I had chosen, a life of artistic pursuit and self-sufficiency, far from the suffocating expectations of my family. My job was both a means to an end and an extension of my passion. I worked part-time as a gallery assistant at the Artisanal Loft, a small, independent gallery that championed emerging local artists. My daily responsibilities involved everything from curating exhibitions and managing inventory to engaging with patrons and handling sales. I loved the energy of the gallery, the vibrant conversations with artists, and the satisfaction of connecting a piece of art with its new owner. My boss, A wonderfully eccentric woman named Celeste with a wild mop of silver hair and an infectious laugh was a mentor and a friend. She recognized my artistic sensibility and encouraged my own creative endeavors. A typical workday involved arriving at the gallery by 10:00 a.m., arranging new pieces, updating social media with featured artists, and preparing for evening openings. I often worked late, helping Celeste host receptions, chatting with artists and collectors, immersing myself in the rich tapestry of the art world. It paid my bills and kept me connected to the pulse of creativity. But my true work was my own art. I was a painter, specializing in large-scale abstract pieces that explored themes of emotion, memory, and unspoken truths. My career aspiration, the dream that fueled my every brushstroke, was to secure my own solo exhibition, to finally have my unique artistic voice truly seen and recognized. I envisioned a series, a collection of paintings that would delve into the subtle, invisible threads of power and manipulation that had shaped my life, translating the unspoken into vibrant, visceral color. I poured every ounce of my spare time and creative energy into these pieces, transforming a corner of my living room into a makeshift studio, its easel perpetually holding a work in progress. My financial situation, while not extravagant, was stable and self-sustaining. My freelance graphic design commissions, a skill I'd honed in college, supplemented my gallery income, allowing me to cover rent, utilities, art supplies, and a healthy emergency fund. I was meticulous about budgeting, a habit instilled by years of needing to prove my financial independence from my family. My hobbies were intertwined with my artistic life, experimenting with new painting techniques, trying my hand at pottery, the tactile sensation of clay grounding me, and exploring new galleries and museums. I also found solace in long walks through the city's botanical gardens, drawing inspiration from the interplay of light and shadow, the intricate patterns of nature. My friendships were few but profoundly loyal. My best friend, Sarah, was a fellow artist, a ceramicist with a fiery spirit and an unwavering belief in my talent. We often met for coffee at a cozy cafe near our studios, trading stories about our creative struggles, offering each other honest critique and much-needed emotional support. We also had a small, eclectic group of friends from the local art scene, a supportive network that celebrated each other's successes and offered comfort during creative blocks. Romantic relationships, for the past few years, had taken a back seat. I'd had a few relationships in my 20s that didn't quite work out, leaving me content to focus on my career and my own personal growth. I dated occasionally, but my independence was paramount, and I wasn't willing to compromise my peace for anything less than a truly supportive and understanding partner. I was content, centered, and deeply invested in the life I had built for myself, far from the complexities and unspoken demands of my family. My mornings were a peaceful ritual. I'd wake with the sun, do a short meditation, and then make my way to my tiny kitchen for a strong cup of Earl Grey tea and a light breakfast. The quiet solitude of those early hours was precious, allowing me to gather my thoughts and prepare for the creative demands of the day. By 9:00 a.m., I'd be at my easel, brush in hand, ready to dive into my work, the gentle hum of the city outside my window the only sound. My workdays were flexible, allowing me to structure my time around gallery hours, client deadlines, and my own creative flow. I loved the autonomy, the freedom to step away for a walk when inspiration struck, or to spend hours lost in the vibrant world of color and form. Evenings were often spent working on my personal art projects, experimenting with new techniques, allowing my creativity to flow without the constraints of client briefs. Sometimes, Sarah would join me for a quiet dinner, or we'd attend an art exhibition opening. Other evenings, I'd indulge in my love for cooking, preparing elaborate meals for myself, savoring the process as much as the flavors. By 10:00 p.m., utterly exhausted but deeply content, I'd usually wind down with a book, reading until my eyes grew heavy, before drifting off to sleep feeling grateful for the tranquil, fulfilling life I had built. It was a life I had meticulously designed, piece by precious piece, free from the subtle demands and unspoken expectations that had once defined my existence. My family, or rather the sprawling, intricate web of the Vance family, was a landscape defined by an unseen force, the unspoken power of my grandmother, Eleanor. She was the matriarch, a woman in her late 70s, impeccably dressed, with a perfectly coiffed silver bob and eyes that, despite their age, seemed to miss nothing. She never yelled, never commanded, but her every gesture, every pointed silence, every delicate sigh of disappointment carried more weight than any shouted order. She wielded emotional control like a finely sharpened scalpel, subtly guiding conversations, dictating expectations, and shaping everyone's perception of reality. Her home, a grand, meticulously kept Victorian house on the edge of town, was the heart of her empire, the stage for her carefully choreographed familial dramas. Every polished antique, every perfectly arranged floral display whispered of her unwavering control. My mother, Sarah Vance, was 55, a gentle soul trapped in Eleanor's web. She was kind, often overwhelmed and perpetually seeking Eleanor's approval, a quest that had visibly drained her spirit over the years. She acted as an unwitting enforcer of Eleanor's unspoken rules, often relaying my grandmother's concerns or suggestions to me, dressed up as her own advice. My Aunt Brenda, Eleanor's daughter, was 58, a woman with a perpetually pinched expression and an air of bitterness. She, too, was under Eleanor's sway, though often resentful of it, frequently taking out her frustrations on me, the easiest target. She was fiercely competitive with her own children's achievements, often subtly comparing them to mine, always finding mine wanting. Then there was my cousin, Maya, 32, Aunt Brenda's daughter and my childhood rival, though not by choice. Maya was beautiful, charming, and initially a favored recipient of Eleanor's unspoken approval. She pursued a more conventional corporate career, which Eleanor openly praised. While we were the same age, our paths had diverged early, with Maya becoming the good girl who followed Eleanor's unwritten rules and me, the artistic one who dared to forge her own path. Our family gatherings, particularly the elaborate Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations at grandmother Eleanor's house, were where her unspoken power was most palpable. The large dining room with its heavy drapes and crystal chandelier became a stage for subtle dramas. Eleanor would sit at the head of the table, presiding over the meal, her eyes constantly scanning, evaluating. A raised eyebrow, a deliberate pause, a faint smile that never quite reached her eyes, these were her tools. I remember one Christmas when I mentioned my desire to pursue art school. Eleanor merely sighed, a delicate, almost imperceptible sound, but one that resonated through the room. My mother immediately chimed in, "Oh, Clara, dear, are you sure? Art is such a difficult career. Your grandmother just wants what's best for you, a stable future." It was a dismissal, a subtle shamming, and an implicit command, all without a single direct word from Eleanor. My role within this system was that of the independent, slightly rebellious outlier. I was the one who didn't conform, the one who asked too many questions, who dared to express opinions that didn't align with Eleanor's unspoken consensus. For this, I was often the target of her concern, her subtle disapproval, her carefully delivered backhanded compliments. I learned early on to guard my thoughts, to keep my true aspirations hidden, and to seek my validation outside the confines of the Vance family. Communication was a minefield of unspoken subtext. Decisions were never openly discussed. They were subtly steered by Eleanor's preferences, her silent judgments acting as an invisible hand. My father, bless his heart, was often absent or merely a passive observer, preferring to avoid conflict rather than challenge Eleanor's pervasive influence. It was a suffocating environment, one that taught me the hard lesson of self-reliance and the bitter truth that not all families are safe spaces for individuality. The pattern of unspoken power, of Eleanor's subtle manipulation, was not something I suddenly recognized as an adult. It was a pervasive undercurrent that had shaped my entire childhood, a constant presence that I internalized long before I had the words to define it. It was like living in a house where the air pressure constantly shifted, but you were told it was just your imagination. I remember vividly at my 8th birthday party held at Eleanor's house. I had received a new set of vibrant oil pastels and I was thrilled. Maya, meanwhile, received a beautiful, expensive porcelain doll, far more lavish than anything I had ever gotten. When I enthusiastically showed Eleanor my pastels, she smiled, a faint, almost pitying smile. "Oh, Clara, dear, those are interesting. So very messy, though. Maya's doll, now that's a classic. So much more refined, don't you think?" She exchanged a knowing glance with my mother, a glance that conveyed without a single word that my artistic leanings were somehow less valuable, less refined, than Maya's more conventional toys. I remember feeling a dull ache in my chest, a childish understanding that my joy was somehow tainted, deemed inappropriate. This memory solidified the first lesson of Eleanor's unspoken power. My passions would always be judged through the lens of her preferences, and subtly found wanting. Another memory from our middle school talent show. I had spent weeks practicing a complex piano piece, my fingers aching from the effort. Maya, meanwhile, performed a simple, crowd-pleasing ballet routine. Eleanor, of course, was in the front row. After my performance, she offered a polite, almost perfunctory applause, her face betraying no real emotion. But when Maya twirled across the stage, Eleanor erupted in enthusiastic cheers, her eyes shining with pride. Later at the family dinner, Eleanor gushed about Maya's effortless grace, her natural stage presence, while for me she merely remarked, "Clara, dear, you played very competently. Such a lot of work you put in." The emphasis on work implied a lack of innate talent, a subtle suggestion that my achievement was purely mechanical, while Maya's was an expression of inherent brilliance. I wanted to scream to defend myself, but the unspoken message was too powerful, too intangible to fight against. I learned to suppress my triumphs, to downplay my efforts, fearing the inevitable judgment. During my high school years, the subtle sabotage extended to my academic choices. When I expressed an interest in attending a specialized arts high school for my junior and senior years, Eleanor's reaction was a masterpiece of unspoken disapproval. She didn't forbid it. She didn't even voice direct opposition. Instead, she merely listened, then let out a long, drawn-out sigh, her gaze fixed on my mother. My mother, immediately internalizing Eleanor's concern, then spent weeks gently but persistently trying to dissuade me. "Clara, dear, your grandmother just thinks it's so important for you to get a well-rounded education at a traditional school. And what about your friends here? You'd be leaving them all behind." The subtle manipulation worked. I stayed at our local high school, resentful but unable to pinpoint the exact moment my own decision had been swayed by Eleanor's unseen hand. Maya, of course, was lauded for her decision to stay at our prestigious local high school, her sensible choice praised endlessly. Even family outings were fraught with these unspoken dynamics. I remember a summer trip to the lake. I loved to sketch, bringing my pad and pencils everywhere. As I sat by the shore, drawing the intricate patterns of sunlight on the water, Eleanor approached, her face a mask of what she called concern. "Clara, dear, shouldn't you be spending time with your family? It's so important to bond. Look at Maya, she's organizing a lovely picnic for everyone. So thoughtful." Her words were a gentle chiding, a subtle shamming of my solitary artistic pursuit, implying it was selfish or antisocial. I put my sketchbook away, feeling a familiar pang of guilt, despite knowing I had done nothing wrong. I learned to hide my art, to pursue my passions in secret, away from their judging eyes. These repeated experiences, these subtle lessons in Eleanor's power, shaped my coping mechanisms. I retreated into myself, into my art, finding solace and validation in the canvas and the clay. I became fiercely independent, determined to build a life where I was accountable only to myself, where my worth was self-defined, not dictated by Alina's unspoken judgments. But this independence also came at a cost, a deep-seated wariness of vulnerability, a tendency to internalize criticism, and a persistent feeling that I had to constantly fight for my right to exist as myself. I understood, on a visceral level, that Alina's power wasn't about what she said, but about what she didn't say, the atmosphere she created, and the way she made everyone else police themselves and each other according to her invisible rules. And this understanding would be my weapon when the time came. The solo exhibition had been my dream, my unwavering focus for the past 2 years. I had finally secured a coveted spot at the Artisans Collective, a highly respected gallery in the heart of the city's art district. Celeste, the gallery owner, was enthusiastic about my concept, a series of large-scale abstract paintings titled Unspoken, exploring the subtle, invisible threads of emotional control and manipulation within families. My centerpiece, a triptych called The Silent Grip, depicted a swirling vortex of muted grays and purples, with a single vibrant thread of red trying to break free. It was raw, honest, and deeply personal, a culmination of my life's artistic and emotional journey. The exhibition was scheduled to open in 6 weeks, and I poured every waking moment into refining the pieces, securing media coverage, and planning the opening night. As news of the exhibition began to circulate, so did Alina's subtle attempts to undermine it. She never called me directly. Instead, her concerns filtered through my mother, Sarah, like a toxic mist. "Clara, dear," my mother would say on the phone, her voice laced with anxiety, "grandmother heard about your exhibition. She's a little worried. She thinks your art might be a bit too abstract. Too dark, perhaps. She's concerned about your reputation, you know, and the gallery. It's a very niche interest, isn't it? Are you sure you'll attract the right kind of attention?" My stomach would clench with a familiar dread. Alina's voice, even filtered through my mother, held that same insidious power, the implied disapproval, the subtle shamming of my artistic expression. I tried to rationalize it to myself. She just doesn't understand abstract art. She's old-fashioned. But the unease persisted, a cold hum beneath my skin. At a strained Sunday dinner at Alina's house, she perfected her craft. When I mentioned the exhibition, her response was a delicate sigh, a barely perceptible shaking of her head. "Oh, Clara, dear, you're working so hard, aren't you? I do hope it all pays off. Your father always said artists struggle, you know. Such a pity." She exchanged a mournful glance with Aunt Brenda, who immediately nodded in somber agreement. It wasn't a direct condemnation, but the message was clear. My ambition was foolish, my path precarious, and I was setting myself up for inevitable failure. The implied financial instability, the suggestion of my father's disapproval, even though he had always been passively supportive of my art, albeit distant, were designed to undermine my confidence. My mother, Sarah, became increasingly anxious, a direct barometer of Alina's unspoken pressure. She'd call me, sometimes multiple times a day, to relay new concerns. Grandmother thinks the name Unspoken is a bit aggressive, dear. Perhaps something more uplifting. And she's heard that this gallery, well, it's not quite as established as some of the others. Are you sure you made the right choice? She'd wring her hands, her voice strained, a clear victim of Aliner's emotional manipulation, now unintentionally passing it on to me. I tried to deflect, to reassure her, but her anxiety was not her own. It was Aliner's, a parasitic entity feeding on my mother's need for approval. I confided in Sarah, my best friend, over coffee. "It's like she's actively trying to sabotage me, Sarah," I whispered, stirring my coffee so hard it almost sloshed over the rim. "She never says anything directly, but the pressure, the doubt she's creating through my mom, it's suffocating. It's the same old pattern, just amplified because it's my dream." Sarah listened, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Clara, she's jealous. She always has been. Your independence, your talent, it threatens her control. You know how she is. Don't let her get to you." But knowing how she was didn't make it any easier. The weight of her unspoken power, her relentless, subtle attempts to undermine me, was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly battling an invisible enemy, one that left no trace but inflicted immense psychological damage. My stomach clenched with a familiar tension, the fear of losing everything I had worked for growing with each passing day. My internal monologue became a constant battle. Don't give in. This is your truth. Don't let her define you. But the insidious doubt, planted so subtly by Aliner, concerns, had begun to take root. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just 3 weeks before my exhibition was scheduled to open. I was in my studio, meticulously applying a final layer of glaze to the silent grip, lost in the meditative rhythm of my work. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Celeste, the gallery owner. Her voice, usually so vibrant and enthusiastic, was strained, almost whispered. "Clara, I need to speak with you. Can you come to the gallery? It's urgent." Her tone sent a cold spear of dread through my chest. Urgent. Her voice was trembling. I knew with a sickening lurch that Aliner's unspoken power had finally struck. I arrived at the artisanal loft 20 minutes later, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The gallery, usually a bright, welcoming space, felt oddly somber, the vibrant art on the walls seeming to mock my mounting anxiety. Celeste was sitting at her desk, her silver hair unusually disheveled, her face pale and drawn. She looked distraught, her hands clenching and unclenching on the polished wood. "Celeste, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My stomach was churning, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. I could already feel the heavy weight of Aliner's presence, an invisible shroud in the room. Celeste took a deep, shaky breath, her gaze avoiding mine. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I have to cancel your exhibition." The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, brutal punch to the gut. "Cancel," I gasped, my mind reeling, trying to comprehend the impossible. "What are you talking about? Why, everything is ready. The invitations, the publicity, the art, it's all set." My voice was rising, raw with disbelief and burgeoning fury. My hand started to tremble uncontrollably, a fine tremor that spread through my entire body. A cold flush washed over me, then a hot, prickling sensation of betrayal. Celeste finally looked at me, her eyes filled with genuine regret and a profound helplessness. "I know, Clara, I know how much this means to you. And your art is magnificent, but I've received some pressure, undue pressure." She wrung her hands. "It's not direct, of course. No one is telling me what to do, but I've had several key benefactors, influential figures in the local arts community express concerns about the gallery's direction, about taking on art that is, well, too challenging, too unconventional. They've made subtle suggestions about pulling their support, about reconsidering their partnerships with other institutions if I continue down this path." She gestured vaguely. "And my landlord, he suddenly sent me a notice about a necessary increase in rent, effective immediately. It's too much, Clara. I can't risk losing everything. I can't keep the gallery open if I lose my funding and face a massive rent hike." My mind raced, connecting the invisible dots. Benefactors, influential figures, rent increase. This was Eleanor's work, her modus operandi. She never had to directly command. She simply had to suggest, to express concern, to activate her network of connections and influence. She had systematically undermined my exhibition, not by direct confrontation, but by pulling the financial and reputational strings that would force Celeste's hand. The gallery owner was a victim just like me, caught in the intricate web of Eleanor's unspoken power. The sheer audacity, the chilling precision of her manipulation took my breath away. "It's my grandmother, isn't it?" I whispered, the words a bitter taste in my mouth. "Eleanor Vance. She never said anything to you directly, did she? She just suggested." Celeste's eyes widened, a look of profound relief and shared understanding dawning on her face. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her own eyes. "She's a very persuasive woman, Clara. She's well connected. She never said your name, never even mentioned the exhibition explicitly. Just concerns about the fragile ecosystem of the local art scene, about the importance of maintaining a certain aesthetic standard for the galleries she supports. It was all very polite, very subtle. But the message was clear. A wave of nausea washed over me, a physical manifestation of the crushing betrayal. My chest tightened, a suffocating ache of despair and white-hot rage. My meticulously planned future, my artistic dream, had just gone up in smoke, not through a direct act of sabotage, but through the insidious, invisible threads of Eleanor's unspoken power. My entire body was shaking, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the anger was cold, precise, and entirely focused on Eleanor. "I understand, Celeste," I managed to say, my voice hoarse, devoid of emotion. I knew Celeste was as much a victim as I was. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." I turned and walked out of the gallery, the vibrant art on the walls now feeling like a mockery, the city sounds a cacophony of indifference. The dream, the exhibition, the culmination of years of work was gone, evaporated by a grandmother's subtle nod, a whispered concern, a calculated manipulation of an entire network. My world felt hollow, tainted, and utterly unjust. My self-worth, which I had carefully built outside her influence, felt like it was crumbling around me. The hours immediately following Celeste's devastating call were a blur of raw, visceral pain and a terrifying sense of void. I don't remember much of the walk back to my apartment, only the cold, biting wind on my face and the hot, steady stream of tears blurring the cityscape around me. My chest ached, a hollow, empty sensation where my dreams had once resided. Celeste's strained voice, Eleanor's unspoken dictates, the sickening realization of the true extent of her invisible power, it all replayed endlessly in my mind, a tormenting loop. I felt physically ill, the betrayal manifesting as a constant knot in my stomach and a pounding, insistent headache. My apartment, usually a haven of creativity, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in on me. The vibrant colors of my paintings seemed dull, lifeless, mocking my shattered aspirations. My first coherent action was to retreat into myself, into the familiar darkness of despair. I curled up on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, and just cried. The tears came in waves, hot and stinging, punctuated by gasps and choked sobs. I felt utterly helpless, utterly defeated. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, an enemy who never has to utter a direct command? How do you defend yourself against concern and disappointment? My phone buzzed incessantly. It was my mother, Sarah. I ignored it. I couldn't face her, couldn't bear to hear her anxious voice, knowing it would be filled with Eleanor's thinly veiled advice. I wanted to lash out, to scream at her for enabling this, for being a passive conduit for Eleanor's manipulations. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. She was as trapped as I had been, perhaps even more so. Later that evening, after the initial storm of grief had subsided into a dull ache, I finally answered her call. "Clara, dear, are you okay? I heard about the exhibition. Grandmother was so worried about you. She said perhaps it was for the best that the gallery wasn't quite, the right fit." Her voice was laced with that familiar, saccharine concern, a direct echo of Eleanor's unspoken judgment. "She canceled it, Mom," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She used her connections, her influence to force Celeste to cancel my exhibition. She never had to say a word, just expressed concerns. It was her, Mom. It was." My mother sighed, a familiar, resigned sound. "Oh, Clara, dear, you're being melodramatic. Grandmother just wants what's best for you. Perhaps your art is a bit provocative, as she said. And that gallery, well, it wasn't very prestigious, was it? Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, a chance for you to pursue something more stable." The gaslighting was immediate, effortless, a practiced defense mechanism. She was trying to soothe, but in doing so, she was invalidating my pain, confirming Eleanor's narrative, and making me feel like I was the one who was overreacting, imagining things. It was a familiar pattern, one that had plagued me my entire life. The call left me feeling even more isolated, my reality questioned by the very person who should have stood by me. My first futile attempt at reconciliation, or rather, a desperate plea for recognition, came the next day. I went to Alina's house, unannounced, driven by a burning need to confront her, to make her acknowledge her cruelty. I found her in her meticulously manicured rose garden, pruning with delicate precision, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Grandmother," I began, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to steady it, "you canceled my exhibition. You used your influence, your connections, to sabotage my dream." She slowly turned, her pruning shears held casually, her expression one of mild surprise, almost pity. "Clara, dear, what on earth are you talking about? Sabotage, my goodness. I merely expressed concern for your reputation and for the gallery. One always wants to see the young people succeed, but in the most appropriate way. I never told anyone to cancel anything. How could I? I merely suggested that perhaps a different kind of art, a different kind of venue, might be more suitable for someone with your sensibilities." Her voice was soft, gentle, devoid of any aggression, yet laced with that familiar, patronizing condescension. "You're imagining things, dear. Perhaps you're just a little overwrought. It's quite common for artists to be so emotional." She offered a faint, sympathetic smile, a chilling performance of feigned innocence. She then turned back to her roses, effectively dismissing me, leaving me standing there, shaking with impotent rage, gaslighted and utterly defeated. My second attempt was to seek intervention from my father. I called him, pouring out my heart, recounting the full extent of Alina's manipulation, my mother's unwitting complicity, and my utter despair. He listened patiently, his usual response of "she means well" replaced by a more hesitant silence. But ultimately his conflict-avoidant nature won out. "Hazel," he sighed after a long pause, "your grandmother just has very high standards. She worries about you, about your future. And you know how she is, she just cares in her own way. Perhaps it's best to let this go, dear. Focus on your other projects." He offered a platitude, a deflection, refusing to truly acknowledge the deep injustice or to confront Alina. His passive support, his unwillingness to challenge his mother, felt like another crushing betrayal, deepening the chasm between us. My third attempt, driven by a desperate hope for a true ally, was a confrontation with my cousin Maya. She had always seemed to benefit from Alina's unspoken favor, her conventional life praised, her career choices subtly elevated. I called her, recounting the cancellation, Alina's role, and my profound despair. "Maya," I pleaded, "you've seen how she operates. You know what she does. She sabotaged my exhibition." Maya listened, her voice initially hesitant, then defensive. "Clara, I don't know. Grandmother can be difficult, but she means well. And your art is, well, it is very intense. Maybe she just thought she was helping." She wouldn't meet my gaze over the phone, her voice filled with a familiar discomfort. She was still caught in Alina's web, unwilling to challenge the unspoken power that had benefited her for so long. These failed attempts left me feeling utterly isolated, my perception of reality constantly undermined, the insidious poison of Alina's gaslighting seeping into my very soul. I began to question myself, to wonder if I was just being melodramatic, if my art was too provocative. The psychological toll was immense. The aha moment came not from a sudden burst of insight, but from a quiet, systematic process of documentation, a deliberate reclaiming of my own reality. After weeks of feeling utterly defeated and emotionally battered, I remembered something Sarah, my best friend, had said long ago. If you can't articulate it, document it. I pulled out a fresh notebook, a clean slate, and began to write. I started with the most recent trauma, Celeste's call, the details of Eleanor's concerns, the subtle pressures she exerted. Then I went back in time, carefully, painstakingly, recalling every instance of Eleanor's unspoken power. The 18th birthday party, the middle school talent show, the art school dismissal, the subtly shamming comments about my independence. I recorded the exact phrases she used: too messy, too unconventional. Such a lot of work, the sighs, the glances, the way my mother would then echo her concerns. I began to see the patterns, the repetition, the calculated nature of her unspoken influence. It wasn't random. It was a well-honed, insidious strategy of emotional manipulation. As I documented, a clearer picture emerged. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't melodramatic. My experiences were real, tangible, and undeniable. I saw how Eleanor never made a direct threat, never issued a clear command. Her power lay in planting seeds of doubt, in activating her network of connections, the benefactors, the landlord, and most importantly, in creating a pervasive culture of fear and guilt where everyone constantly sought her approval and dreaded her disapproval. I realized that my mother, my Aunt Brenda, even Maya, were not necessarily malicious. They were simply caught in the same web, too fearful or too accustomed to Eleanor's control to see it for what it was. The turning point came when I discreetly reached out to my father's older sister, my Aunt Caroline, a woman who had always kept a certain distance from Eleanor's influence. I told her about the exhibition, about the cancellation, about my suspicions. Aunt Caroline listened intently, her voice filled with a quiet understanding. "Clara," she said, her voice low, "Eleanor has always operated this way. She controls through guilt and obligation. She never has to say a word. She did it to your father's first wife, to her own sister, even to me. She plants the seed and lets others tend to the weeds." She then shared a story, how Eleanor had subtly undermined her own dream of opening a small flower shop decades ago, using the exact same tactics of concern and reputation. It was a profound moment of validation. I wasn't alone. Others had seen it, experienced it, and suffered under it. This wasn't just my story. It was a family pattern, a legacy of unspoken power. The fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, righteous anger and an unshakable determination. My vindication, I realized, wouldn't come from getting Eleanor to admit guilt. It would come from breaking her spell, from bringing the unspoken into the undeniable light of day. I started documenting Aunt Caroline's story too, adding it to my growing dossier. The investigation had not just unearthed the problem, it had provided the solution. I had Eleanor's playbook. Now it was time to turn the tables. The preparation for this confrontation was meticulous, strategic, and entirely devoid of emotional impulsiveness. I knew that directly accusing Eleanor would be futile. She would simply deny, gaslight, and turn the family against me. My goal wasn't to make her confess, but to expose the pattern of her unspoken power, to articulate the invisible threads of her manipulation so clearly that even the most unwilling members of our family would be forced to see it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about liberation for myself and potentially for others still trapped in her web. My main ally in this battle was Aunt Caroline. After our conversation, she had become a staunch supporter, her own past experiences fueling her desire to see Eleanor's reign challenged. She agreed to be present at the confrontation, a calm, authoritative voice who understood Eleanor's tactics intimately. Maya, my cousin, was a more hesitant ally. I shared my documented evidence with her, the meticulously compiled list of Eleanor's subtle slights, her concerns, her gaslighting. Seeing it all laid out, seeing her own experiences reflected in my notes, slowly chipped away at her ingrained deference to Eleanor. She didn't commit to speaking up, but I saw a flicker of doubt, a nascent understanding in her eyes. My best friend, Sarah, provided unwavering emotional support, reminding me of my strength and urging me to trust my own voice. I spent countless hours rehearsing my approach. I wouldn't be aggressive, I wouldn't yell. I would be calm, factual, and articulate, describing the effect of Eleanor's actions rather than accusing her intent. My internal monologue was a constant stream of mantras: stay grounded, speak your truth, do not engage with her deflection, look at the faces of others, break the spell. I organized my notebook, dividing it into sections: the exhibition, childhood slings, career sabotage, mother's anxiety. Each section contained specific dates, Eleanor's exact words or lack thereof, and the resulting impact. This binder wasn't just evidence. It was my shield, my anchor in a sea of emotional manipulation. I knew this would be the defining moment of my adult life, a battle for my self-worth and my autonomy. My fear was still a palpable presence, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, righteous determination to finally bring the unspoken into the light. The confrontation happened on Thanksgiving Day, a gathering notoriously held at grandmother Eleanor's house, the very heart of her unspoken power. The grand dining room, usually a stage for her subtle manipulations, would become the arena for her undoing. The long mahogany table was laden with a lavish spread, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and simmering tension. Everyone was there, my father looking uncomfortable and withdrawn, my mother, Sarah, her face etched with nervous anticipation, constantly glancing at Eleanor. Aunt Brenda, her usual pinched expression amplified by a simmering resentment. And Maya, my cousin, sitting beside me, her eyes darting nervously between Eleanor and my prepared binder. Eleanor, resplendent in a deep cranberry velvet dress, sat at the head of the table, presiding over the feast, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandelier. Her gaze swept over us all, a silent assessment, a subtle reminder of her unwavering control. The dinner progressed with the usual forced pleasantries, Alina orchestrating the conversation with her subtle cues, directing praise towards Maya's conventional career, offering a delicate sigh about the challenges of the modern world. Then she turned her gaze to me, a faint, almost pitying smile on her lips. "Clara, dear," she began, her voice a soft, saccharine melody, "I do hope you're finding some new avenues for your artistic pursuits now that your exhibition has, sadly, fallen through. Such a shame. Perhaps something a little less intense next time, something more broadly appealing." She exchanged a knowing glance with Aunt Brenda, who immediately offered a mournful nod of agreement. It was her opening, her predictable, subtle jab designed to remind me of my failure and her concern. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest, but this time I was ready. I did not react emotionally. I simply met her gaze, calm and steady. "Thank you for your concern, grandmother," I began, my voice clear and surprisingly strong, cutting through the murmuring conversation. The entire table grew quiet, sensing the shift. My father looked up from his plate, his eyes wide with surprise. My mother visibly flinched. "In fact," I continued, pulling my binder onto the table, its solid presence a stark contrast to the delicate crystal and porcelain, "your concern is precisely what I wanted to talk about today. Not just about the exhibition, but about a pattern of subtle guidance, you might call it, that has shaped many of our lives." I opened the binder deliberately, slowly. Alina's composure visibly faltered. Her smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a sudden, sharp anger. "Clara, dear, what on earth are you doing? This is Thanksgiving. We're here to celebrate family, not to dredge up unpleasantness." Her voice, though still soft, held an edge of warning. "I believe this is about family, grandmother," I countered, looking directly at my mother, then Aunt Brenda, then Maya. "And it's about acknowledging the unspoken truths that have defined our relationships." "Mother," I said, turning to Sarah, who looked terrified, "do you remember when grandmother suggested you pursue accounting instead of your dream of being a photographer? And how you never once questioned it, despite your unhappiness, because grandmother always knows best?" My mother's face went white. She looked from me to Alina, then back, her eyes filled with a dawning horror, a profound realization. Alina, for her part, gasped, a delicate, feigned expression of shock. "Sarah, dear, Clara, you are upsetting your mother. I merely offered advice based on practicalities. A mother always wants her daughter to be secure." "Yes, grandmother," I agreed calmly, "always practicalities, always concern, and always, it seemed, the precise advice that led us away from our own authentic paths and towards yours." I then turned to Aunt Brenda, who was staring at me, rigid with anger. "Aunt Brenda, do you remember when you were offered that scholarship for art school, and grandmother sighed about the precarious nature of artistic careers? and the importance of family legacy, causing you to turn it down and pursue a more conventional corporate path. Aunt Brenda's jaw dropped. Her pinched expression dissolved into a look of raw, vulnerable pain. She looked at Alina, then at me, her eyes filled with a new, unsettling clarity. Alina, now openly furious, slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. "Clara, this is outrageous. You are fabricating stories. You are trying to turn my family against me." "Am I grandmother?" I asked, my voice still steady, drawing out my notes. "Or am I simply bringing the unspoken into the open? I have documented every instance of your subtle guidance, your concerns, your disappointments, from my 8th birthday party, where my oil pastels were deemed messy compared to Maya's refined doll, to my middle school talent show, where my competent piano playing was overshadowed by Maya's effortless grace." I looked at Maya, who was now openly staring at Alina, a profound understanding dawning in her eyes. "Maya," I continued gently, "do you remember how you always felt you had to choose a sensible career, even when your true passion was for environmental activism, because grandmother always praised your practicality and good sense, while subtly dismissing anything that felt too radical?" Maya, for the first time in her life, looked directly at Alina, then back at me, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "She told me once," Maya whispered, her voice trembling but clear, "that being an activist was unbecoming for a young woman of my background. She said it was unladylike to be so passionate." She looked at Alina, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "She never told me directly not to do it, but I knew. I always knew what she wanted." The room was utterly silent. Alina, her face a mask of rage and desperate denial, was stammering, trying to interrupt, but her usual words of deflection were losing their power. My father, Marcus, finally stirred, his face etched with shame and a dawning understanding. He looked at Alina, then at me, a profound sadness in his eyes. He had been a bystander for decades, but the collective weight of the articulated unspoken was undeniable. "And finally, grandmother," I said, closing my binder, its clasp snapping shut with a decisive click, "my exhibition. You didn't have to call Celeste directly. You didn't have to issue a single command. You simply expressed your concerns to your network, you hinted at reputational damage, you orchestrated financial pressure, and the gallery, fearing for its survival, was forced to cancel my show. All without a single direct word from you. This," I stated, my voice ringing with authority, "is the psychology of unspoken power. It is manipulation disguised as concern. It is control disguised as advice. And it has suffocated us all for far too long." Alina stood up, her face contorted, her voice shrill. "This is a vicious attack. You are an ungrateful, malicious child. You are tearing this family apart." She pointed a trembling finger at me, then at Maya, then at my mother, who was now openly weeping. "You are all against me. You are betraying me." She was playing the victim, her ultimate defense mechanism, but this time it sounded hollow, desperate, and utterly transparent. The spell was breaking. The silence that followed was no longer heavy with Alina's unspoken power. It was filled with the dawning realization of her manipulation and a collective, palpable sense of liberation. My vindication was not in her confession, but in the knowing glances, the stunned silence, the subtle shifts in posture around the table. The unspoken had been spoken, and its power, finally, was shattered. The immediate consequences of that Thanksgiving confrontation were nothing short of a seismic shift in our family landscape. Aliner's unspoken power, once an invisible, unassailable force, visibly fractured. Her usual subtle tactics now appeared transparent, even ridiculous to eyes that had finally been opened. Her gaslighting, her feigned indignation, her delicate sighs of disappointment no longer held their sway. Instead of inspiring fear or guilt, they were met with uncomfortable silence, averted gazes, and even in some cases outright challenge. My mother, Sarah, usually Aliner's most fervent enabler, was utterly devastated by the revelations. The recognition of how deeply Aliner's manipulation had permeated her own life, how she had unwittingly sacrificed her dreams and passed on that emotional burden to me, was a profound and painful awakening. She burst into tears, not of sorrow for Aliner, but of regret and anger for herself and for me. She left the dinner table, unable to bear Aliner's furious attempts to twist the narrative. Aunt Brenda, though still deeply entrenched in Aliner's web, looked utterly shell-shocked. Her usual resentment towards me had been replaced by a dawning, uncomfortable understanding of her own lost opportunities, her own suppressed dreams. Maya, my cousin, visibly straightened, a newfound strength in her posture. Her initial nervousness had given way to a quiet defiance, a resolve that had been absent for so long. She looked at me, a silent nod of solidarity passing between us. Aliner, faced with an unprecedented collective resistance, crumbled. Her attempts to isolate herself, to retreat into her usual weapon of pained silence, no longer had an impact. She was no longer feared, she was seen. She retreated from the dining room, her face contorted in a mask of impotent rage, her weapon of disappointment now a dull, useless blade. She became isolated, a lonely, embittered figure in her grand house, her carefully cultivated network of influence beginning to unravel as people started to question her true motives. My father, Marcus, remained largely silent during the initial confrontation, his face a canvas of profound regret and dawning understanding. After Aliner retreated, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, heartbreaking apology. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry. I never truly saw it. Or maybe I didn't want to. I let her do this to you, to all of us." His acknowledgement, his admission of complicity, was a crucial first step in rebuilding our fractured relationship. He approached my mother, offering a genuine, tearful apology for his own passivity. The immediate changes in family dynamics were stark. The next Sunday dinner was canceled. Aliner refused to host, claiming illness, but everyone knew it was her retreat. My mother, Sarah, for the first time in decades, called me to suggest a quiet dinner at my apartment, just the two of us. She wanted to truly talk, free from Alina's shadow. My conversation with her that night was long and painful, filled with tears and shared memories, but it was also profoundly healing. She admitted her fear of Alina, her desperate need for approval, and her deep regret for enabling the manipulation. It was the beginning of a true, authentic mother-daughter relationship. I firmly established new boundaries. I made it clear to my father and mother that while I loved them, I would no longer participate in any family gatherings at Alina's house where her manipulation went unchallenged. I would not allow myself to be a target or a silent witness to her psychological games. This wasn't an act of aggression. It was an act of self-preservation, a clear statement of my autonomy. My vindication was not in Alina's suffering, but in the palpable sense of liberation that settled over the family, the feeling that a heavy, invisible burden had finally been lifted. The emotional atmosphere in the family shifted from one of stifling control to one of tentative, yet hopeful, freedom. It was as if, by speaking the unspoken, I had allowed everyone to finally breathe. The extended consequences of that Thanksgiving confrontation rippled through our family and wider community for months, fundamentally altering dynamics and revealing the true nature of relationships. Alina's influence, once absolute, withered like a neglected plant. Her unspoken power, now widely recognized as manipulation, lost its effectiveness. People no longer feared her delicate size or sought her approval. They saw her for what she was, a controlling, lonely woman whose only remaining weapon was bitterness. She became increasingly isolated, her grand house growing cold and silent, a stark contrast to the lively family gatherings it once hosted. Her calls were less frequent, her concerns dismissed as irrelevant. She became a poignant, almost tragic figure, a matriarch who had alienated her own family through her desperate need for control. Some family members, particularly my Aunt Brenda, found it difficult to break free. Brenda continued to cling to Alina, perhaps out of habit or fear, or a shared sense of grievance against me. Her resentment towards me, initially softened by the revelations, hardened again as Alina successfully blamed me for tearing the family apart. But even her remaining loyalty felt brittle, born more of inertia than genuine connection. Her power over me, however, was utterly gone. Her attempts to subtly compare or dismiss my achievements no longer landed. My mother, Sarah, blossomed in her newfound freedom. The initial pain of facing Alina's manipulation transformed into a quiet strength. She started pursuing her own interests, taking photography classes, the dream Alina had subtly crushed decades ago. She and I grew incredibly close, rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. She visited my studio often, genuinely interested in my art, her praise no longer filtered through Alina's lens. My father, too, continued his transformation. He became a more present, engaged parent, actively seeking to understand my life and support my choices. He regularly called Alina, but his interactions were now firm and assertive, no longer meekly accepting her dictates. He even encouraged other family members to visit me, fostering new connections and a healthier, more authentic family dynamic. Maya, my cousin, took her own brave steps towards liberation. Inspired by my confrontation, she eventually quit her corporate job, a path Alina had always lauded, and enrolled in a graduate program for environmental policy, her true passion. We became close, sharing stories of our journeys, our friendship forged in the shared experience of breaking free. She often joked, "You handed me the crowbar, Clara. I just had to decide to pry open the cage." My career as an artist, meanwhile, soared. With the mental and emotional burden of Alina's unspoken power lifted, my creativity flowed unbound. Celeste, the gallery owner, invigorated by my courage and the shifting dynamics in the art community, many benefactors who had quietly supported Alina's decisions now subtly distanced themselves, reoffered me the exhibition. My Unspoken series, now with the added context of my family's drama, resonated profoundly with audiences. It was a massive success, leading to new commissions, features in prominent art magazines, and invitations to exhibit in other cities. My art became a powerful expression of my journey, transforming personal pain into universal truth, validating my voice in a way Alina could never silence. The family home, Alina's Grand Victorian, stood as a monument to a fading era, its power diminished, its matriarch a lonely figure, her unspoken influence finally exposed as hollow. Life 6 to 12 months after the dust settled was, without exaggeration, a tapestry woven with peace, purpose, and profound joy. I had truly, finally come into my own. The oppressive weight of past resentments and family drama had evaporated, leaving me lighter, more centered, and utterly at peace with myself. My loft, bathed in natural light, hummed with creative energy. It was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, a vibrant hub where ideas flowed freely, and where my art came to life. My career as a graphic designer and fine artist was flourishing beyond my wildest dreams. I had expanded my team to 3 talented designers, and our studio was consistently booked with exciting projects for ethical, socially conscious brands. We were gaining national recognition, and I often traveled for client presentations or industry conferences, something I could never have imagined before. The financial freedom afforded by my thriving career wasn't just about wealth. It was about true autonomy, the ability to make choices based on passion and principle, not necessity. I established a foundation in my mother's maiden name, supporting young, underprivileged artists, ensuring that others, like my past self, would have the resources to pursue their dreams, unburdened by financial constraints. My mental health had never been better. The anxiety that had once colored my every interaction with my grandmother was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. I practiced daily meditation, finding profound calm in the stillness. I embarked on a journey of self-discovery, exploring new interests, traveling to places I had only dreamed of, and fully embracing the richness of life. My living situation was ideal, perfectly suited to my creative and independent spirit. I reveled in the freedom of my own space, the ability to shape my environment to reflect my inner world. My relationships had blossomed. My bond with my mother was stronger than ever, our friendship a constant source of laughter, support, and shared understanding. My father, in his quiet way, became a true ally and friend, his presence a comforting, supportive anchor in my life. Maya, my cousin, became a cherished confidant, her journey towards authenticity mirroring my own. I also forged new, deep friendships within the art world and beyond, connections built on genuine mutual support, free from any hint of ulterior motives. My love life, which had been a distant thought, even began to blossom as I cautiously navigated a new relationship built on trust and respect, a testament to my newfound confidence and self-worth. My confidence had soared across all aspects of my life, in client meetings, in my art, in my personal interactions. I had learned to set and maintain healthy boundaries with grace and firmness, understanding that protecting my peace was paramount. I no longer apologized for my ambitions or for choosing my own path. Reflecting on my personal growth, the transformation felt profound. The Clara who once walked on eggshells, meticulously planning her escape from unspoken control, was long gone. I had learned that true self-worth comes from within, from living authentically and from standing firm in your truth. If I could go back and tell my past self one thing, it would be this: Clara, your voice is your power. Trust your instincts, fight for your truth, and never, ever let anyone else's insecurities or subtle manipulations define your destiny. The strength you gain from this will be your greatest triumph. And your art, your beautiful, honest art, will be your most powerful truth. I learned that the psychology of unspoken power is a dangerous game, but that articulating it, bringing it into the light, is the ultimate act of liberation. Betrayal, though agonizing, can be the catalyst for the most profound redemption and self-discovery. As for forgiveness, I've found a deep sense of peace, but not absolution for Elena. Her actions were calculated and deeply hurtful. I no longer carry the anger, choosing instead to channel my energy into positive, creative endeavors. My healing came not from her repentance, which never came, but from my own empowerment, from building a life so rich and fulfilling that her malice became utterly irrelevant. Moving forward meant embracing my authentic self, free from her shadows, and using my resources and my voice to create a more just and beautiful world. My story, once a private torment, became a quiet source of inspiration. Through my foundation for young artists and my public speaking engagements, I've had the opportunity to share my journey, particularly with young people who feel marginalized or controlled in their own families. I received countless messages from individuals who, after hearing my story, found the courage to pursue their passions despite familial disapproval, to challenge unfair situations, or to simply trust their own worth. I saw the ripple effect of my courage, how it could empower others to carve their own paths, to articulate the unspoken truths in their own lives. It showed me that even the most painful personal family drama can be transformed into a powerful platform for positive change, proving that redemption isn't just about what you gain, but what you become and the impact you have on the world. So to all of you out there listening, remember this: your voice is your power. Your worth is inherent. Don't let anyone, no matter how close they are, try to define you or diminish your light through subtle manipulation or unspoken control. Trust your gut. Speak your truth. And when the world tries to dim your light, find your voice, because sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to shatter a lifetime of silence and to set yourself and others truly free. Like this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and triumph, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community where every individual's worth is celebrated and every voice is heard. Thank you for listening.